All right, good evening, everyone. Hope you can hear me all right. We are in the library, so I am wearing my mask. And in case anyone shows up, we got to stick by the rules. So if there's only a couple people. If you have questions, feel free to interrupt, including my dedicated audience of Alex Hurley. This is Stephen Borne, if you can't recognize me under my mask. So the couple things to talk about, we're going to start with the warrant articles, and they are posted online. You can click this link. We'll post this afterwards, once if we can, with the recording. So you'll have these. Candidates night is going to be February 24th at 7 p.m. We're still actually, it says town hall streams, but we're talking to Andy. We may go Zoom to help with the chatting. If you are new to Rye, we are an SB2 town. How that works, there's some information from the state here with that link. And if you don't get the Rye Civic news, you can just email us and we'll help you get added or go to the website and do that. So we're going to cover the town warrant articles and the school warrant articles. And here's a list of everything that is on the ballot. It's condensed view, so you can quickly see and scan what's there, what we're going to be talking about on February 5th at 9 o'clock at the junior high school. So here's who's running. Here's the people that signed up. We're glad to see that we do have a candidate for every race, and the contested races. For candidates nights, we're just going to have the contested people. For select board, we've got Bill Emberson and Kathy Hodson. For library trustees, there's two candidates, Victor Ozzie and John Hart. For zoning board of adjustment, that one seat for 1 year, we've got Sandra DeRosas, Jen Madden, and John Mitchell. I don't think any of those three are the current alternates either. For the school board, there's two seats. We have three candidates, Susan Ross, Catherine Ericart, and Danielle Maxwell. And then for supervisor of the checklist, for one seat, 6 years, we've got Karen Oliver and John Myers. And actually, I do remember a few years ago, there was a competition for the supervisor of the checklist. So candidates night will be February 24th. So warrant articles, multifamily development. So what this does is right now, the state says you can't have any less than, zoning can't say you can't have less than 5 units. What this does is currently we allow up to 8 units per building. So, and the max you can have is 40 units there. So with the going down to 5, or 8 units. So anyway, so right now, if you look at 1244 Washington, that has 5 units. And if you vote no, you can only have 8. The reason why I included Seaglass Lane here, because the explanation says is to keep in keeping with the rural character of Rye. Editor's note, I just question it when the planning board approves things like Seaglass Lane and what's out on 1244 Washington. Another thing impacting multifamily developments is that they've increased the spacing 25 to 35 feet to give more room in there, so it would be less dense looking for when those units are, those kind of developments are approved. The other one is the Housing Appeals Board. So the state created a board. Typically, if you had a problem with the zoning or planning board, you could take it to the courts. Now you don't go to the courts. You first start with this 3-member appeals board. And actually in the paper this week, somebody in Portsmouth did that. So you can read more about how that works on the link. And really what this warrant article is just changing that wording. So it lets people know you can go to this appeals board and then in the court. So it just adds that verbiage. The next one, driveways. What this does is it calls out that for driveways, when you're adding changes, you need to get a permit. So it's helping to make that a little bit clear. I included the section of the land use regulations here. Something interesting, when I was doing that, I have a printout when we got the deliberative session. We approved the consolidated code book, and that was just under 400 pages. What's online is 536 pages. And, the land use chapter, it was missing, but that's only 100 pages. So where the other 40 pages come from, between what we saw at the deliberative meeting and there, it wasn't clear. But this adds that verbiage. Stone wall. So right now, it doesn't identify in the setbacks that stone walls can't be in there. So it adds stone walls to fences. And what it does, but a retaining wall less than 6 feet can be in the setbacks. Anything bigger, actually, a retaining wall of 6 feet doesn't need a variance like a fence does. So this differentiate retaining walls from stone walls, and stone walls become grouped in as a fence. The other one is the planning board gave themselves the ability, if they find mistakes, to correct those in the ordinances without having to go to the ballot. And this was a change that they did that one. So if you want to see what they did, you can go to that one. So going on to the financial articles, the town budget, it's increased up to 11,000. We will go over this in a little bit. If you're not familiar with the default budget, the way that works is if the budget gets voted down, we go to a secondary budget, which is set based on what we approved last year, plus anything that we're obligated to spend. So if there are mandatory salary increases or healthcare things, that's how the default budget is created. At the deliberative meeting, you can reduce the budget and increase it by no more than 10%. If you want to do that, there's a link to the MS7 because you need to say, which account in the budget you're adding or reducing. We found out that a few years ago when our past town attorney wouldn't tell me personally how to do it until we had a vote so that he would tell us how to write it correctly. But if you want to do that, you can reduce the budget as much as you want. You can make increases. If you want to put in their money to do more testing at the Grove Road landfill or down the beaches, or put in money, let's say, for planning. Feel free, go to the MS7, find out what the right account is. And when you write your petition, when you go to amend the budget at the deliberative session, you would want to add those. So the highway department, our new highway department, Jason gets us from Dennis. It's a plan. And this is a real good example of good planning where these are all of our vehicles and when they want to be expired. One of the things that DPW has learned is that, even if it takes a lot of work to buy a vehicle, get it equipped, get it up, and that we, every year we're using all these buildings. So all these machines or trucks, it's helpful to every year contribute. So that's what we do with the next warrant article. We contribute to this fund. And this year we're taking out $200 to buy a new backhand loader. This is the one that moves things around the transfer station. But actually what's going to happen is the new one is going to go to the highway department, and the highway department's going to move over to the transfer station. So to most of us, it's not going to make a difference, but they're shifting equipment around that way. And this warrant article doesn't really, all it's doing is taking the money out. The next one is putting $100 in. So right now, as of the end of October, when we have the information from the CIP, that there's 268 in it, 200 was coming out, and we'll put another 100 in to that warrant article. And actually 1.4 million, we've got more than that now. The fire department does the same thing. If you go by the safety building and look at all those vehicles in there, there's at least 8 vehicles taking up all that space. And then that big, huge roof above it that we're paying to heat. And this table below is something I put together a number of years ago to show that Newcastle, Northampton, Rye, Greenland were oversaturated with fire equipment. We've got more equipment than we could ever use, and what we really need is more people, but the communities don't work together. And on the right shows you what comparable sized towns that for serving that number of population, what they have a vehicle. So anyway, fire and ambulance capital reserve fund. So same thing, we're putting in $100 every year, $100,000 every year. It's actually 150,000 because we get that from the Grove Road cell tower, which brings us to a good question is the Port Way cell tower. We will be getting money. Have we started getting that money? Where's that money going? Because it was conservation land. They were the ones that the Grove Road cell tower money to. The Port Way cell tower is the town. So the question is, where's that money going? What happens with it on Port Way? Should maybe go to camouflage. The Municipal Buildings Construction Renovation Fund, we established this 2 years ago now. It has 256,000 in it remaining. The initial money came from the trolley barn. While it says any municipal building, the reality is probably going to be used for the TD Town Hall Annex expansion, but we're putting more money to that. We'll get up around 350,000, which isn't even enough to do all the work at the annex and what happens at Town Hall. We start a little bit out of order, but it's just okay. The municipal buildings fund has 140,000 in it, and we used to put actually less in it. Now we're putting 35,000 in it. And there's a balance of that at 256,000. Oh, actually, no, that's the renovation fund, but there's two funds, one with 140, 256. This one is supposed to be for buildings maintenance, not restoration. The accumulated leave fund is another one where this is employees leave. We have to pay them out their vacation. What they've accumulated says you should have 50% of what your liability is. But a good question for the deliberative session is, what happened that it had to jump from 50,000 to 100,000? It had historically been 50,000 all the time, and that's what we're always told that's what we need to get it up to that, to be where we should be, but it jumped 100. So what happened that we fell behind? And we had to do this. Records restoration, very similar, where we need to back up and take care of those. So we've been putting that money away periodically, and that only has 5,000 in it. The next one, the wastewater asset management, this one is actually a loan we're getting from this fund. We're only liable for $300 of it. And the sewer department is going to use this to take an inventory of all their assets. So go back to the DPW, had the list of all their trucks. Sewer's got this very similar problem with, what do we have for assets? How many pumps? How many of these, generators? They really don't have a handle around what all their assets are. And what's the maintenance and replacement schedule? So this is to help the sewer department get ahead of that. 400th anniversary celebration. We're going to be 400 years old pretty soon, along with Dover. No, just Rye. No other town's going to be 400. No, Alex says the other towns claim we're the only ones that do it. So this is for us to toot our horn and have money to buy a horn and have something to toot. And so Select Board Member Tom King is leading this. There are others that are helping it, and this is to give them money to help us do those things. The reevaluation of capital fund, we are doing the reevaluation actually this year. Your houses will be reassessed. We'll talk about that with the budget. And so this cost about $60,000. The last few years, we put away $30,000 to cover the 60. A more balanced way of doing this is putting away money every year. And so this fund was set to us so that every year we'll be contributing to that. So then we get to the 50th year, we'll have the 60,000 or more that we need to do that work. The Goss Barn Maintenance Fund is to take care of that property down there. If you were at the event in September or you got to see what a wonderful property this is, I would have included what's in this fund, but I don't know because I don't have it anywhere and I couldn't get it. So it'd be good to get that. The next funds are focused on the library, so we group those together. Same issue with accumulated leave. They have less employees. They don't need this money, but they have been putting it in. They just established this in 2018, and so we're still behind and got a ways to be caught up on that. The building maintenance fund has got about 30,000 in it. This adds another 10,000. This fund's been around for a while. We used to only put 5,000, but we're adding more. Actually, we put 5,000 last year. Now we're putting 10,000 this year into that fund. The HVAC in the building we're in is soon to fail. We've been putting money in. They believe the estimated cost is around 70,000. So maybe next year with some money, just one more contribution, they'll have what it needs, and hopefully we'll have that money before that work needs to be done. Recreation building reserve funds. If you've been down there, those modulars, they need help. They need work, but the good news is that the Rye Rec is, put aside $10,000 to come up with a new master plan to do that. And we should talk about that when we get to the populations later. Grove Road landfill. So this got up to 12,000. We spent 6,000 testing last year around some tests that were supposed to be done not every single year. We're only putting 3,000 back to this. And this is, if you remember with the PFOAs, we got very high readings and we're sampling. So we're not doing continuously. It's every, month that they're going there. And who's to say that a plume of PFOAs can't come and go without us ever catching it? So we do this periodically. This is, if you wanted to put in more money, it'd be a good place that you could add and specify that too. I always love showing this picture because it's the transfer station. The darker is the more transmissive it is. So the most porous land is where we have our dump, and it sits on top of our best well, and across the road is our Grove Road landfill, which is also very porous going down to our best well. This is a picture I took a number of years ago. Looks different now with the work they've done for the salt shed, but it just shows, you know, they were those safe routes. They were cleaning the buckets, and you could see the blue, how it goes downhill. Everything goes downhill from back there and flows towards the well. So the elderly exemptions haven't increased in a number of years. And the rules, you know, what you have to qualify, you have to live in you have to live in New Hampshire for a few years, minimum incomes, none of these have changed, which is a good thing. And what this is doing is if you're 65 to 74, you can reduce the value of your house by this much to reduce your taxes. And why is this important? Because there's some market dynamics that are going on between the last assessment and now. And so if you look at home A, if that was, you know, valued at 500,000 in 2017, it's risen really quickly to be worth 625. So you're going to be taxed on $125,000 more, where that $2 million home may only be, let's say, worth $2,050,000. So only a $50,000 increase. So the houses on the bottom end of the market, because of demand, are increasing in value faster and at greater dollar amounts than some of the $1 million houses. So the people, so to help the elderly from not being taxed out of Rye, this is what that's for. Community power program, and this is probably why Howard was here. Here's some good links for the information. I will add the February, the short presentation I believe I have. There's been a number of public discussions where you can go back and look at those, a lot more detail. But essentially what it is it's an agreement that says Rye is going to participate with other communities to pool our buying power to get better rates. Still gets delivered by Eversource, so the trucks and our delivery source is still there, but it gives you flexibility to say where that energy is going to be generated from. And so what this agreement does is the select board signed it. It allows us to be in it. The select board are using the Rye Energy Committee to be our agents to represent us in this group of communities across New Hampshire. And it is new, it's evolving, it's changing a little bit, but there will be a presentation and more details on this at the deliberative meeting. This is ban your vote. If you remember what happened to people in Greenland, I think people refer to this group as Stop the Steal. They got 25 residents in Rye to get a petition warrant article on here. And so we may get to see who's that and you know why they think we need to do this on the 23rd. The next one is a voice of the people, very similar to what we did what happened last year with try to stop gerrymandering, but it's the way it didn't work, which is just, you know, we're voting for something and then the select board are going to communicate that to the governor. This is about puppy mills, and it was explained to the select board that people are inhumanely breeding cats and dogs and then, you know, just giving them to outlets that just, you know, don't have the animals best at heart. They're trying to make a stance for this to try to slow down the sales outlets and saying our community does not want any business that's selling these, having animals raised this way and being sold. So you'll learn more about that. There's over a meeting also, I believe. The next one is being driven by a senior at Portsmouth High School from Rye. Portsmouth has done this. The second, I think Monday in October has been called Columbus Day. Changing this to Indigenous People Day because, you know, we know now Columbus didn't discover America, and he's also attributed with some other things that are so great to be celebrated. And we don't do enough for the Indigenous People Day. The state has an article to create a different Indigenous Day, but this is really about not having it referred to in Rye as Columbus Day. Selectmen sell surplus equipment. That one's every year. All right, the school budget, we'll talk about that, but that's 15,000. Same rules apply about making amendments. You can raise it up to no more than 10% of what the budget committee approves. You can reduce the school budget, and if it fails, it goes to the default budget that we talked about earlier. The next two articles are very the same, and what this is, if there are unassigned fund balances, so if they've over budgeted, let's say it was warm, we didn't spend enough money on heating oil or other things happened, and there was additional money left at the end of the year because they didn't spend what was budgeted for. If there is money, then up to this amount can be put into the maintenance expendable trust fund. And if there's not that money, then, you know, a no vote would do that. But this is only if there is additional money. We're saying the school board has the authority to put that there. And it's the same one used for the tuition trust fund we did this a number of years ago. We actually had a number of articles to build up a pool because we knew we had a lot of kids going to high school. So instead of getting hit with a big spike, we put money into the same thing. If we get to find a situation where there is additional funds out of the unassigned fund balance, they can be applied to the school board. So, all right. Whew. All right. I stopped sharing. Where's my Zoom? Does anyone have any questions on the warrant articles? No? I don't know if anyone's here. I can't make this thing big. Oh, look, we got more people. Michelle's here. Mike Teal. All right, any questions on the warrant articles? No? Quiz me? All right, let's go to the next presentation. We'll talk about the budget. There's a budget presentation. I got to start sharing. I'm sharing my screen. If you guys people can't see it, speak up. Is that okay? There's a box here I got to get rid of. Hold on. Okay. All right. So let's talk about our budget. We're good town and then the school. So I think everyone on the Zoom, in case of recording, doesn't understand how our taxes work. This is from 2020. We have this information because it was in the last town hall report. So appropriations are everything we're going to spend. So what are we going to appropriate? What are we giving the town school authority to spend? But that's not what we have to raise taxes for because we have revenues. So you take the revenues out and what's left is what we have to raise for taxes. And so town, school, county, and the way the tax rate comes from, it says, all right, how much money do we need to pay for the government we agreed we're going to get? Then what the select board's been doing for the last decade or more is been taking money that's left over, just similar to the school, the unassigned fund balance, and they use it and it reduces the tax rate because they subtract it from the money we need. All right. And then what we do is, to balance it out, we do it by property value. So the 2.1 or 2.2 billion is the assessed value of all the property in Rye. So we take the money we need to raise, divide it by the assessed value, and then we put some zeros on there, so it comes out to 10.22. So we're always not talking about a 0.01022 tax rate, and that becomes a tax rate. So if we said we're going to spend $2 million on a project, that's going to increase the tax rate by $1 million. So if something went up by, let's say, an increased spend that we see, like one of the departments went up, increased by 220,000, that actually increased the tax rate by 0.1 and the spending. And so if you want to figure out what your tax bill is, it's just your assessed value, knock off 3 zeros times the 10.22. All right, so now let's jump ahead a year. And this is, what happens with your taxes. So, oops, getting this Zoom message because I keep on talking with the mouse and turning things on. So this is how the money moves. So we approved this budget in July. We should have approved it in March. And your first tax bill you got was in December. The next one you'll get is in June of this year. So all your money goes into the town clerk and then it gets divvied out. 10% of that goes to the county. All right. Another, if there's a question in the chat, can somebody just tell me what it says? Because I can't pop the chat. I need to know it. Now the school is getting that 63%. And don't forget, once again, Don't let any politician tell you they got rid of the donor towns. They didn't. They just had to stop paying the donor towns. It's still on the books. It's still here, and we have to report what we pay. But that 63% of your tax bill goes to pay for our 3 schools and the overhead, or our 2 schools, PHS, and then the overhead from the SAU 50. The town is actually down to 27% of our tax bill. It used to be about 30, and that goes for everything we'll talk about now. And then if you live in one of the 3 districts, Rye Beach or Genesee, you pay additionally. Now, this year, I don't know the date, and I've asked the town for the exact number, but what the town did is said, all right, what's the tax rate going to be for this year? And they said it's going to go up, and they didn't want it to go up. And they said, well, what do we need to do to keep it the same? And they said, well, we have to take almost $2 million out of the unassigned fund balance. And the state says you have to have between 5%, there's actually 2 rules of thumb, between 5 and 17% of all the money you're going to need this year in a slush fund. And that's what you need to keep on reserve, make sure you can keep on paying your bills for everything. And so we had over 4 million in that, I believe. We were able to reduce it by just about 2 million to pay down taxes. So that's why the tax rate is the same for 2 years in a row, is because the select board said, what's the number we need to take from the unassigned fund balances so our tax rate's the same. Okay, so it wasn't by luck, it was by design. All right, how much government are we buying in Rye in 22? If all the budgets pass as is. The town operating budget is about 11 million, another $500,000 in warrant articles. The school budget is up to 15 million. Rockingham County is not up by much. Out of that $49 million budget, Rye's responsible for just over 4% of it, which comes to about 2.1 million that we pay. Is that right? Yeah. All right, and then the Rye Water, we'll talk about this later, but the water is a pretty big district. Their budget's up to 1.7 million. Plus, there's going to be another 75,000 warrant articles, and then a main replacement they're going to pay out of operating expenses, another 852. So if you're in the 2/3, I think, of Rye that is in the Rye Water District, you're buying $32 million worth of government services and investment this year. We don't have the numbers from the 2 other village districts, the Rye Beach and Rye Beach District and Genesee Beach Village District. We'll add those. We get those. So this is a table people find interesting, and it's, what do you contribute for this? So I'm in a library. If, let's say, our house is worth 750,000, it would be nice. And for the library, it means our contribution is $218 to run the library this year. For total government, if your house is worth that $750,000, this is what you contributed for those services based on the assessed value of your home. If your house was a 2 million, just double the numbers, etc. And somewhere. So it just gives you a feel for what you're paying. The big one is, how much you contribute for education. You may not have kids in the school system at all, but if your house is assessed at $1 million, you're paying $6 million a year, or $6,000 a year for that education. So, you're paying attention to how good of a job's happening with your money. Okay, the total budget, let's look at some pies. This is how it breaks out. It's always been the big 4, but remember we talked about Rye Water? So it'd be probably, if Rye Water would be the same size as that Purple Police slice. So just to give you an idea of the, how it fits into the other categories, and that's what we spend on each of them. And with a percent increase, just a different way of looking at it. So where some of the increases be in the planned budget, this is sorted by the size of the budget. See, that's why general government's the top, how much it's gone up. So you can see that, what's gone up. Some things have gone down. The other services, that 112, that's actually the new land assistant. We got the numbers that they're adding. So that's why that big jump is. And you can see some of the increases, and then the debt service has gone down, and capital outlay is really slowed down spending a little bit. That's what that number is. But overall, the town budget is up 3.8%, less than, not counting the warrant articles. So some of, like we talked about, it's up over $500,000. Here's where some of those big spending are. We talked about the other services that position. You know, some of them aren't up, a couple of them are down at the end. General government's up by that almost 200,000. Here's how that land use administration looks at it. It's just under 100,000, but this gives you a sense of salary is only going to be 55,000, but benefits are $40,000. So, you know, every time we add somebody, it's not that salary, the benefits for, you know, municipal employee, and they make this a permanent position. So it's not that easy to get rid of permanent positions. So we're into that. Another interesting thing that I found when I was going through the budgets and getting ready, what jumped out at me was like, why does the capital improvements plan need $1,500 for spending? Because I was the only one there and at the public hearing, and I was looking online. And so I started looking through all the budgets, and in 2021 in printing, we spent $7,000, but we've gotten the 2022 budget 21,000. So that's a good example. We learned to do things differently under COVID. Probably didn't spend as much on printing, but why are we still budgeting and going back to the ways that are just as expensive? So just a little tidbit that leaped out at me. So what were some of the biggest increases? So remember we talked about that, you know, that increase to the tax rate, you know, DPW operations up to 20, you know, so that's actually added about a 10 cents to the tax rate. But the tax rate didn't change because we paid so much down, or actually next year would happen. But this is what happens here. Here's some of the fire, recreation revolving. Don't get hung up on that one because, you know, the programs have money in coming out. That's just what they think they're going to be spending on programs. So that revolving fund turns out to be a wash on that one, etc. So the other ones are smaller too. This gives a good idea of what's happening, you know, with them, how the big four compare, because notice they just dwarf everything else. Very similar to the pie chart, but the bar chart just gives you a different perception of it. And, you know, if Rye Water was there, it would be right in there, in between the red and the green, on how big they are. And you see it's going up at that steady rate over the last 5 years. And if we look at it, it's nothing, you know, it's not new. If you look at 10 years, it continues to go up, and this is looking and see how much the general government's gone up. The red is the DPW, it's up 1 year. Police continues to rise, fire continues to go up over 10 years. Notice the debt dropping. You know, we had a big drop in debt a number of years ago, so a lot of the previous increases, you know, have been masked by the debt going away. And there was another big debt drop before that, was right around the time we got rid of the donors town. So actually we got rid of donor town. We didn't have to be shelling out so much money, but we put in debt. They sort of canceled each other's out. So we could see it in the tax rate, but that's what happened there. Over the decade, what are some of those things contributing? So, you know, fire has gone up about $750,000. Same thing with general government. Police has gone up by $500,000 over the past decade. So that gives you an idea how to increase it. But notice, you know, once again, what's keeping the tax rates is what we're paying from the unassigned fund balances. When we first started doing this, we actually weren't, you know, we're putting money away for that slush fund and building up. But the last 7-8 years, it was 300, 500. The biggest one was 800. Now it was 900,000 the year before. And this past year was almost 2 million. So it's almost unprecedented, well, setting new highs all the time for how much extra money there is, and it's being used to keep down taxes, which is masking everything going up. Now, speaking of the debt, you know, we really don't have a lot of debt. It's been dropping. We've been paying it off. The blue is the principal and interest. This is all we've got left. As you can see, in a couple of years, one of the conservation land bonds are going to be gone. So really a discussion that I've never been part of in the town or heard anyone discussing is what's the right level of debt that, you know, we should be having, because we should be making constant investments in planning. There is the capital improvement plans, but never a discussion about how much debt can we afford and what we should be doing to balance it out and proactively working on that planning. These are, oops, hold on. These are the warrant articles. I took out the ones like the backhoe one, because that's just taking money out of an existing fund. The sewer really isn't anything. And so the warrant articles in 2022 that we're approving add up to about $500,000 in
Steve,
warrant articles. Yep.
Steve, can I jump in here, seeing as the issue that I asked a question about is at the top of this list?
Yep.
That town accumulated leave fund. Is this a union contract thing or what? Because there's certainly lots of studies around that say you want your employees to be taking their vacation time because it improves productivity, and you don't want to be paying them out at the end of their career for it all, which you get the benefit of inflation, everything else, and the city or the town gets no benefit from it. And as far as sick time is concerned, well, most private sector places that I ever worked for don't consider sick time as vacation time, and you don't accumulate it indefinitely.
So that would be an excellent question for the deliberative meeting, because this did jump. It was normally 50,000, it's up to 100,000. What the town tells us is that their guidance is that you should have 50% of your liability. So two things, what happened that we dropped by that amount that we need to put in 100,000? And to add your part of the question, what's our, is it all unions, or should we be doing things so we don't have to be putting so much in this kitty to keep this liability? People should be taking their vacation days as they go, and not
seriously, it should be use it or lose it, or a minimum amount that carries over. Yeah,
and so that could come up, and what the public can do is maybe add a amendment to that warrant article saying that yes, this is approved, but we need to start working to the next contract with the union employees. The voters want them to have something like that in the next contract.
Okay.
So we bring it up now, not before they negotiate that contract and bring it to the voters.
Fair enough.
Okay. All right. So those are all those, the $500,000. So that trend is going up. If you see it over the past 7-8 years, and the warrant article spends, it's shifting money from operating budgets to outside. So you don't see the budgets increases. And probably the biggest reason why we're having more and more things in the warrant articles bucket is because we got more and more. So if you go back to this, a lot of these weren't around a few years ago. The reevaluation fund, GOS fund, the library. So we've been increasing the number of these, but this year we had the big jump in the accumulated leave. But there are more of these reserve funds than we've had in the past. And we have about, I think, I have it on the slide. I think I had it somewhere. Oh yeah, here we go. I can't see it because it's hidden, but there's the total amount we have in all these reserve funds between capital reserve and other funds. I may update that table, you can see them, but you can see the balances as of October 31st. It's a lot of money that's sitting there in these reserve funds. Okay. All right, school budget. Oh, did somebody have another question? Because I saw it. I can see the chat. I don't have it open when I'm in presentation mode, so it's not on my screen. So, all right, school budget. This is how it looks. One thing that one of the review comments we shared it with school board was that teacher salary. It's showing it doesn't include benefits. We can't break out the benefits because the school doesn't give it to us like that. And because the administrator and other people are all part of that benefit package. So we can't really take out just the benefits for the teachers to show what goes to the cost of just teachers. So that request was made, but we really can't do it unless the school is going to give us a lot more information. Here's how it goes with a high school tuition, taking about 20%. And then the benefits is the big bucket with the SAU that makes up most of the school budget there. This is what's in the different categories. Salaries, just salaries, not the benefits, and the tuition. So if you know what exactly is in each of those buckets. And then how does that break up in the increases? So, the school budget is up by 5.8%, almost a little over 800,000. The biggest increases were health insurance costs, which we can't do much. Personally, I mean, I like to see that the fact that there's staff increases, because over the last decade, there seems to be just cutting of additional support. So they are adding a kindergarten, some special needs stuff. So that's getting there. Transportation costs are going up. And then the special education, there are things that, you know, we have kids, current students, and they need additional IPs. You know, we need to provide what the children, what the specialists say, or the experts say the children need. So those costs are up, and they're not controllable by anyone. So looking at that, you know, the administration costs, if you look at these, you know, the salaries and down the bottom, staying pretty flat. PTS tuition, you can see how it stays in that same band, not getting any bigger. The administration is really what's going up, and those are the benefits and the SAUs that it's driving that. So if we look at that over a number of years, you can see that administration costs going up. The SAU over the last 5 years is up 43%, and where salaries really aren't going up that much, the high school tuition, everything else is staying relatively flat. It's the benefits, the health share, and the SAU that are big drivers pushing up the school budget. Looking at that over the last 5 years, it's gone up, you know, 1.9 million or 14%, 2.7 annual. And you can see how much the last, you know, handful of 5 years, you know, the school budget's gone up from, you know, 13 million to 15 million, and the number of students has changed. So almost 600 students back in 1819, we're down to 534. And that's a trend that's continuing. So the yellow line is the total students over the last 11 years. The high school students have stayed relatively flat, and 14, 15, it peaked out at 205. We had a small spike, if you can see in the gray line. In 2021 was more kids because of COVID. But, you know, everyone says, yeah, we know Rye's becoming more, you know, of a retirement community. We know that the median age is going up, but here's some data that shows that the number of kids in the school system is dropping. In the years, the 10 years from 2011 to 2020, if we read the building inspector reports the correct way, there were 142 more homes that were added. And the net from the census data, you know, population has gone up 4.6%. So, you know, more homes, more people, less kids in school. So, you know, another set of numbers for the dynamics that are happening in our town. And that's where I got that number from, the consensus, and that is it. Okay, anybody want to play Stump the Host? We had some chats. Employees are not typical month vacation. Okay. All right, any other questions for me? Tell me you like my mask. No one noticed I got a haircut a couple weeks ago. Nothing else? You're gonna send me home early. This is the fastest I've ever done this.
That was a fast presentation, good one. A little too fast to maybe absorb it all, Steve, but good.
Yeah, I think if we had more of an audience than just Alex, it would have slowed me down. So, all right, well, this is being recorded, and I appreciate everyone for making the time.
Are your slides available, Steve?
I've got to update them a little bit, and then I will post them on the Civic News. It'll be near the top. I'm going to create a, you know, Rye election section, and I'll post these, and I've got to figure out how to get the recording.
Can you send us an email when that's updated and the slides are available?
Yeah, I don't know who HTL is, but I got Joanne Harden, Michelle, Howard, Lisa. And like I said, if HTL tells me who you are, I'll send them to, but I can put out an email for that. So I can post the slides tonight and then just delete them and then put up new ones later. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.